Okay, so this isn't really that much of a planned out video. I just really feel a need to share my thoughts on the subject. I'm not entirely sure where these thoughts are coming from exactly. Maybe because we're in a simulation and because this has been programmed into me. I don't know. No, honestly, I actually do think I know what's triggering these thoughts. I was editing photos I took recently and thinking about this weird phenomenon that has happened to me several times over the last few years. I'll be looking out at people from my balcony or just from a distance in general. And I'll think to myself, gosh, they're like little ants, basically. They're just tiny little dots moving around. It is almost like they're sort of background characters in the play, in the video game that is my life. For me, from my point of view, because I will never get the chance to probably have an interaction with 99.999% of those people. And I actually use the video game analogy because that's what's kind of tripping me up. I don't play very many video games. I'm a little bit weird in that sense. I don't own a single one right now. The two that I play whenever I'm with my family, whenever I spend time with my brother or my dad, are FIFA and Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Those are the two games that have survived from childhood to this day that I still really enjoy playing. Otherwise, I never buy games. I don't have any on my phone or any like console or anything because I just have an addictive personality and I found that I could lose entire days just playing games. I'm just like that. So it's better to just remove it from my life. I remember playing Civ 5, Sid Meier's Civ 5, for example, on my computer and having this like feeling of dread in my stomach at 1 a.m. after realizing I just spent a bunch of hours playing it instead of, I don't know, working on some sort of project. I'm weird, okay? Anyway, every once in a while, when I go back home and spend time with my family, I'll be hanging out with my brother who does play video games. He's a gamer, and I'll look at the graphics of the video games that he plays, and I am just astounded. They're getting so good. In fact, they're getting so good, it kind of looks kind of like what I see when I look out from my balcony or from a distance at people walking around. It's getting to the point where it's indistinguishable, the graphics that you see. It's something about how technology continues to advance, and we are so far from even understanding what is potentially possible. Something about that is just making me think, like, it's unreasonable to think that we are not in a simulation. Like, what I'm saying is, who's to say there isn't some sort of other race, other creatures that are godlike and invisible to us, undetectable, that are so far ahead, further advanced, that they can easily create realities where a world like ours exists. And so, yeah, like the blurring of the lines for me in terms of the graphics and what we're capable of just makes me feel like eventually at some point in the future, if we continue on this trajectory, we could easily create simulations that look like worlds like our own.
And who are we to think we're the first species in the entire universe to be able to do that? Give me a break.
And I don't know what my conclusions are on this sort of thought train. I don't really consider this a conspiracy. I guess maybe some people might. It's more so like a thought experiment for me because it doesn't fundamentally change anything, right? We're still here living life in this world that may or may not be a simulation. But it does just kind of challenge my thoughts on like fate versus free will. And I don't know. I think there's a part of me that actually doesn't really like the idea of full free will. Like the full weight of responsibility of my entire existence, all my actions and decisions. It's just too much responsibility. I have realized that I'm just far too irrational of a person, far too incapable of managing myself properly at times, that I think I prefer a little bit of fate at play. And so the idea of living in a simulation sort of shifts things. Not that necessarily everything would be predetermined, because I think a properly created, complex simulation like the world that we live in would allow for some level of free will. That's programmed into things. But of course, it isn't entirely random necessarily. Like, I don't know if what we're living could even be considered entertainment to a superior race that created this world. I think also one of the reasons why I fall into this sort of line of thinking and just start imagining things is because life does feel extremely random sometimes. And people talk a lot about things like synchronicity and whatnot, which I'm certainly willing to consider. There are oftentimes weird coincidences that happen, but I don't know how much of that is just my own perception. That's me just trying to connect dots and see things, see patterns in my life. But if I take a big step back and look at this year in general, or I guess just any given year in human existence over the last 100 years or the last 1,000 years. It just feels like it's just a really advanced version of any of the video games that we already have right now. So this is like a completely unscientific video here. I'm not providing any sort of evidence. Once again, I consider this a thought experiment more than anything. I don't know how it necessarily fundamentally changes anything for anyone, but it's weird. It's like a weird concept that it makes me kind of uncomfortable in some ways, and at the same time it sort of makes sense. I have noticed, however, that in discussing this with people that I know, friends of mine, acquaintances, conversations at dinner and whatnot, people have really warmed up to this idea. Like, the more we see what technology is capable of, the more we realize, like, oh, it's really not a major leap to imagine this. It may be really funny 30 years, 50 years from now, looking back on this time period where we began to really consider this seriously and wrap our brains around it, when, you know, like I said, in the future, it might just be like a given. It might be like, duh, obvious. I don't know, just wanted to put my thoughts out there, try to articulate them, put them into words, and would love to hear your thoughts and input and feedback on this, where you're at, if there's interesting resources out there that I could start reading up on. So anyway, thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing all of your very interesting comments in the comment section. Let's figure this out together, and I'll see you soon.